Well, there's a lot to do. Um, there's a lot of discussion, especially among the technical guys, on what sort of conditions should be imposed on licenses. I tend to favor fewer conditions on licenses. In the old days, the ancient days, the licenses were attached to specific technologies and applications. So if you had a license to do voice communication, couldn't necessarily do data or text or anything else. You needed to apply for that. Today, that's less the case. In the old days, you had to use a specific technology. Now, you're allowed to refarm more when you want to. A lot of people are saying, well, with 5G, we need to make sure all the applications are there. If people talk about connected cars, you need to have a standard for connected cars. I really have a hard time understanding that. I went shopping a few years ago for a Mercedes. Yeah, I was buying a Mercedes. It's a nice car. And they offered me Wi-Fi on the car. And as I understand, the technology is such that to get Wi-Fi, you actually have to have something like 3G or 4G service to your car. So I think the cars are already connected today. So what do you need a new standard to have connected cars? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I think the technology guys don't look at the markets and don't understand. It's almost like they don't even understand what's out there today, that the market's way ahead of the regulation. And so why should there be the regulators now telling Mercedes and Audi and Chevrolet, General Motors, Toyota, what technology they have to put in their cars when they've been offering connected cars now for several years? I don't understand that. Now, obviously, General Motors and Volkswagen don't provide the wireless network, but they have contracts. And maybe you can't get Vodafone service on a Mercedes in Germany. Maybe you have to get T-Mobile service. Well, I'm not sure the regulation should impose who Audi or Volkswagen allows to connect to their cars. That doesn't make much sense either. So there's the question of what the regulation should do to make 5G successful is to allow the market and the firms that are innovating to offer the service, make it ubiquitous and not get in the way of the market. Now there's one other key thing that's fairly important, and that's that there's not excessive concentration. So one approach that's been recommended many years ago, and the world is sort of moving very slowly that way, is toward a spectrum manager concession type model, where each band has a firm that can do whatever they want. It's sort of like a real estate model. So if somebody buys a piece of land in Brussels or Berlin or London, there's some zoning laws, so they can't interfere with their neighbor, that's fine, but they can put an apartment building in, an office building, a department store within the zoning laws. So that's a much different type of model than has been in place in most places until now. The world's moving that way, but you ought to get there more quickly. And to get 5G, where nobody really knows what the 5G model is and what the business case is, it's too early to tell. There's a lot of work to develop the marketing and innovation plans. In order for the regulators to not be in the way of that, they need to have fairly open license conditions and ensure there's not excessive concentration within any given band. Having excessive concentration within band limits competition and will stifle innovation incentives. Well, I know there's auctions in Italy, Spain, Switzerland, to name a few, scheduled. The Netherlands is further off. UK just finished an auction. One of the things I hear, like I was just talking to someone about Italy, is they're supposed to have an auction in July and the rules aren't out yet. I advise bidders a lot on auctions. I advise regulators some, and usually we like to have like 6 months lead time. And maybe some small little details in the rules matter quite a bit in terms of what we think we can win and how much we're going to pay for it. So if you have to finance $1 billion or $500 million or $3 billion, it usually takes more than 2 weeks to arrange that financing. So one of the things the regulators can do is try to provide adequate lead time and notice for the firms. Again, the competition issues, Switzerland just had a decision that almost effectively limits the opportunity for one of the 3 incumbent MNOs to win enough 5G spectrum to be a full 5G player. There'll be some opportunities, they won't necessarily go out of business, but so it's still pretty harmful. The other part where the regulators, each country, it's sort of good. Europe has a lot of different approaches to regulation, but it's fairly common for the regulators in one country not to learn very much from either the academics or what's gone on in other countries. And so there have been a bunch of sort of designs promoted perhaps by commercial parties as new, fairly innovative. The CCA was one, the combinatorial clock auction was one. I worked on that in a number of countries. I remember I talked to the Swiss regulator a year in advance of the auction, explained that it was very likely that, or very possible that one bidder would pay more for less spectrum. And they said it was a very interesting theoretical possibility. And so my client won 1/3 more spectrum for 1/3 less money. So they spent roughly 150 million Swiss francs less for 1/3 more spectrum, which it was nice for them. The other guys weren't too happy. Now, I really shouldn't complain. We did well. I do have one problem. When I go back to other firms and they ask me, can we help? And I said, yeah, this is what I did in Switzerland. I said, oh, okay, so can you guarantee me this outcome in my country? And, you know, it's like, if you win one game in soccer and World Cup 6-0, can you guarantee the next game will be 6-0? And that's sort of hard to do, right? Or maybe you tie Spain 3-3, so you're going to tie Germany 3-3? I'm not sure that'll happen either, right? So that's the only problem I have with that. But that's not a good design. There was another one, the combinatorial multi-round auction, that has a weird incentive property, and it incentivizes bidders not to report all packages they're interested in. That's not explained anywhere in the rulemaking, and any of the countries have considered that, because there hasn't been anybody who's seriously looked at that and done good analysis. Larry Ossibel's done a little bit, we've done a little bit in terms of the analysis, but none of it's been published or been vetted in any peer review or rulemaking process. A lot of the auction design's hard, auction management's difficult. The regulators need to pool resources. They need to pool resources effectively to get the best designs. They don't do a very good job with that. Ideally, the operators should help doing that. They have an interest in not having bad auctions. On the other hand, sometimes some operators do very well at the expense of other ones. So their incentives are a little bit mixed. But that's also a very important, so I'm trying to put myself out of business, by the way. But if the regulators did a really good job, then my role would be much more reduced, that they wouldn't need my help to not lose or to win. But the regulators probably should do a much better job of sort of trying to learn from each other. It's difficult, and even when there's a lot of time and effort put into design, and there's some fairly innovative ones, they don't always work perfectly. UK did floors a few years ago on the 800-2600 auction, and it got some bidders in with some blocks they might not have otherwise won. It was probably good for ex-post competition. Was it transformative of the market the way they might have hoped? Probably not. There's continued pressure for consolidation in the UK. Ofcom's been pretty hard on trying to ensure there's 4 operators. They've done a pretty good job, but it's not an easy battle. And a lot of countries have gone from 4 to 3, and so it's not clear whether 3 is all that competitive versus 4. The data sort of, little data that's done suggests that 4 is a bit more competitive, better for consumers than 3, but it's very hard for regulators to make sure they're 4. They can't force Vodafone to invest or Deutsche Telekom to invest in the country when they can't make any money. So regulators, it's a hard job, but that's the goal of the regulation, to make sure consumer welfare is maximized.